Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Michigan State Spartans Insider Podcast. I'm your beat reporter for Michigan State Spartans on SI, Aidan Champion, and we're going to be talking about Michigan State men's basketball's home and away conference slate for next season. It was announced today, Tuesday, along with the rest of the conference, and it's got its pros and cons for sure. One of the benefits, Michigan State won't be seeing UCLA and USC on the road next year. And of course, those were the two away games that they had lost, the only two away games Michigan State had lost last year. Both those teams got better through the portal this offseason, just like many teams in the Big Ten so far this spring. One big thing about Michigan State hosting UCLA, of course, is the return of Xavier Booker, and that will be a much anticipated game. I'm sure he'll have a chip on his shoulder. I don't think there was any bitterness with his departure, but I think he probably sees that as an opportunity to prove to Michigan State that he's worth more than they saw. And Tom Izzo, of course, had put a lot of that blame on himself with how everything transpired with Book, but it was ultimately Book. I mean, for whatever reason, just could never really get himself going. And when you're coached by Tom Izzo, more often than not, that's on you. The legendary coach of his status, who has sent so many guys to the NBA, who have gone on to thrive in the NBA, you gotta look inward. And Book has got a good head on his shoulders, great kid, comes from a military background, and I'm sure he did, place some of the blame on himself as well and took ownership. But I think ultimately this will just work out better for him. Him at UCLA, they needed a big, and I could definitely see him getting to, some sort of level that's close to where he was hoping to be, where people had expected him to be. But we'll see. But he'll be back in the Brazil next year, and that'll be fun to watch for both sides. And then Michigan State. What's probably going to be the toughest game on their schedule overall is them having to go back to Mackey and face a much improved Purdue team that was already pretty solid last year, but fell off at the end, of course, but got um, significantly better this offseason. And Mackey, probably the toughest place to play in the Big Ten. Michigan State, of course, has had its struggles there in the past. Of course, a lot of that was due to Zach Edey, who has moved on to the NBA since, but that's going to be a tough one, no matter how Purdue's season goes up until that point. That's never a place you want to play. And then another one of the tougher places for opponents to play in the Big Ten, Kohl Center, where they'll have to play Wisconsin. Of course, Wisconsin came to Michigan State last season, where the Spartans beat them. And then Wisconsin would end up knocking Michigan State out of the Big Ten tournament. So not only is this, a big game in terms of the venue, but I think there's going to be, um, you know, I think both teams will, have each have a bit of a chip on their shoulder. Wisconsin wanting to get back at them um, for uh, for that trip to East Lansing, and then Michigan State doing the same for, them getting bounced in the Big Ten tournament. And you know, one thing I do think people need to keep in mind is that no matter what the away schedule is, it's always going to be tough. Okay, I don't care who or where you're playing because, as we all know, no game in the Big Ten is easy. No road game in the Big Ten is easy. And so you're always going to have, you know, two or three really tough environments that you're going to have to play in. And that's just how it plays out. Um, some of the other ones, Michigan State will have to play at Minnesota again. Played there last year. It wasn't a problem. That was their first Big Ten game of the season, and they um, they didn't have much trouble with the Gophers there. Some other notable ones, they won't be making a trip to LA, but they will be playing at both Oregon and Washington. I'm assuming they would combine those trips for a Pacific Northwest trip. Those Oregon, tough place to play, very much so. Depending on, I don't really know what we're gonna see from both those teams next year, but regardless, long, far away road trips are always tough, and we saw it, get the best of Michigan State last year with the LA trip. Regardless of, you know, whether or not you think the trip itself had an impact, um, I think it always plays a factor when you got to go that far away from home for a week or so. Always going to be tough. And then, of course, Assembly Hall, Michigan State, another place they didn't have to play last year. That's going to be very tough. Assembly's always a very tough place to play. And, I did say that no matter what, you're going to get a tough road slate every year. This one is pretty um, noticeably difficult. And this isn't even, talking about where I think or what kind of team I think Michigan State will be next year. I think, me personally, that Michigan State will be fine. I think the people are, a lot of people are getting too ahead of themselves with worrying about how they stack up against other teams and how they did in the portal. Because one, it's only April. Two, this team was in a very similar situation last year where it lost its three top scorers, where people felt Tom Izzo wasn't utilizing portal enough or didn't like who he got in the portal. Um, you know, for goodness sakes, you won the Big Ten last year without a guy who making the first or second team all Big Ten. The names don't matter. They don't. So, I'm getting away from the schedule here, but it, it, I bring this up because when I'm talking about the schedule, I'm talking strictly about where they're having to play. I don't think who they're going to be as a team will have anything. Well, not that won't have anything to do with it. I'm just putting that out of the conversation. I don't. Um, I'm saying regardless of if they're great or if they're a bottom tier of the conference team, that this is a pretty brutal road stretch for Michigan State. They will have the benefit, of course, being at home against Maryland. Um, again, I mentioned UCLA, USC. Um, Northwestern. I mean, that's never a very easy place to play. You can always get caught off guard there. And then Ohio State, never easy to play in Columbus either. So that will be beneficial for them. They don't have to go there, but doesn't matter too much when you consider where they do have to go. All in all, yeah. I mean, it's it's going to be a tough road season. I don't think anyone should be surprised. Um, and it's just, that's how the Big Ten is. I mean, it's never going to be easy. So, and we saw it last year, all how everything played out, the things I mentioned, them losing their top three scores, them not having a first or second team honoree, still win the Big Ten by 3 games, still faced hardship with that West Coast trip, and then 2 games after that, stunned by Indiana, looking like your season is going completely south after such a strong first half or so. Um, I mean, I don't think people should get too carried away in April. That's all I'm saying. It's fun to look at the schedule. It's fun to see where you're playing, but I um I wouldn't blow it up. It's always going to be tough no matter what. So with that said, probably the last we'll be talking basketball for a little while. I don't anticipate much happening with the portal on Michigan State's end. Um, but if anything transpires, we will let you know, as always. And I thank you all again for tuning in, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. Thank you so much.